Again, nice to see you all again. My name is Hale, and joining me as our is Jadster. Jadster. Um, and we will be mostly talking about the balancing changes. We saw the cards and runes and charms come out on the 25th, so that was about 4 days ago. So we've had plenty of time to kind of let that sink in. Members of the community, content creators have done the reviews as well, and those were all super cool. I think a lot of them really hit the nail on the head with like the direction we were trying to take with a lot of these changes. And for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to see the latest changes, which are the mechanics, we actually had the announcement for the mechanics come out just a few hours ago. And there's some really interesting stuff there. What did you say, Jester?
Yeah. Along with the mechanics, and like now you'll get a more clear picture or the direction we're heading in for season 4. Like when we rolled out the cards, runes and charms changes, many people are like season 3, it's going to be the same repeat for season 4. But now I think most of the players will get the full clear picture, and like the new mechanic changes are going to like bring out hopefully new archetypes, and also like I think it's an overall positive change for all the teams that exist currently.
Yep. I think like generally we'll get to the reasoning why we did it, but then like overall it's all about having like the smooth game experience, and there are certain things which are can be frustrating in the game, such as like having to lose your cards when you didn't want to, and like the keep mechanic. I think that's going to be a really good one moving into season 4. But I do want to touch on the idea of like like season 4 being like a repeat of season 3. And I think like something, and we said this like in the last town hall and the town hall before that, that we really are moving towards this direction where we're trying to do this little fine tunings we can in the most impactful way to like improve the game, the meta, the landscape, of course increase the viability of different play styles, different parts, different classes, runes, charms, and all those things. So you might notice that like a lot of these changes are quite small or minimal, so to speak. A few of them maybe not so much, but then that's why we're here to bring them up. I do see a few hands being thrown up. Trust that we will have a Q&A towards the end as usual, maybe even in the middle as we transition between these different topics. But then we'll don't worry, we're not gonna spend too much time on all these, because we all know you've seen them before, but then we want to add more context to these changes. So any questions, we will have the rooms open, the usual questions only channel just above. I think it's just above. Yeah, just above the stage is open for questions. We'll look in there for questions now and then. The view only chat, I believe Jadster has a nice graphic for us regarding the mechanics changes that he made himself, so we'll be sharing that with you as well. But for all the general chat, feel free to just send it here in the Axie stage. So yeah, that's about it.
Yeah,
actually,
I think we have a good amount of people in the audience. We can start probably.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's actually really great because we're only 5 minutes into this stage, and like there's already like 128 people in here. It's like I like the moment I started this stage, there was like 70 people. They just jumped straight on, and it's great. So
yeah, they're listening to the good music.
True, that is true. All right, so I think we can get the show on the road. What do you think, Jadster?
Yep. So we're gonna start first with the cards, runes, and charms changes. Go over them, and then later on we'll explain in detail about the mechanics change and how we're hoping they're gonna affect the game mostly in a positive way.
Yeah. So I think we can start with the cards if you're feeling it, Jadster. What do you think?
Yep. Yeah. Sure. Let's start with the cards first. Yeah. So like starting off, I think I bet like most of you have already read the changes, but like let's dive a little more in depth onto them, right? So first of all, as you saw, like Gill and Catfish, just a numerical boost to them. So like these cards, they're supposed to be played with the bubble archetype and also the AoE archetype, but as you like most of you saw, like the other cards just outshone those. Like bubble teams prefer to just stack up bubbles, play a little defensively, and just burst all at once. So with these little stat boost towards these cards, we hope to have like a more aggro bubble teams swap up, and also like these can also benefit the AoE teams, because now the base stat is 75 if you're going AoE, and just the on top of added bonus of bubbles is like extremely good. And so we hope to like see more of these cards in play now. And next up we have the Beast class. So Beast overall got a pretty good buff. Let's talk about the card that got a rework first, that is Hero. So now this card, like some people are saying it's a nerf, some people are saying it's a buff. But overall, like the flavor of this card has changed. Now it's more of a combo type card. Like if you're really running, aggressive like front to back beast or aggro beast, and now Hero can really help you pull out those combos. Whether it's your like endless anger turn, whether it's a cottontail turn, like Hero will guarantee you those attack cards now. So, and like I think most of you can already theorize how with the new keep mechanic it's gonna further enhance the effect. So really looking forward to all those aggressive decks playing Hero now. And next up, the risky beast, not so risky anymore. Previously it was like just deadly with the death mark, but now it just gives you hex, so it should be more usable now. And like we saw some, and along with risky beast, Ronin also got a buff. Now it's the base is 45. So for the back slot, you have like two very good cards now. Obviously, Ronin in terms of damage, like on your main Axie, Ronin is better, but risky beast can still see some use maybe on the front Pango tanks, and like we'll see. Just the card is more usable now. And the last on the beast cards is Imp. Well, the base damage on Fury form is now 45. Like Imp is a good card, but like from now it's just even greater. Like if you're able to pull off the combo, like your Fury turns are gonna just hit that much harder. So let's see how the like Fury Beast, like the really aggro ones, make a comeback this season around. All right. So next up, the bird cards. The first is Feather Spear. I guess most of you notice like all the spear cards have received this buff. Now it's not just the Axie playing the spear card. Now all the spear card Axies are gonna receive the Feather Spear buff. So this is like really important for us, like to enhance the spear cards overall, and like bring out the spear archetype. Like there's so much creative stuff possible with this, but earlier the power levels were not that much, so that it's viable to play. But now we're hoping like people can come up with like some really creative stuff with the spear cards in general. Next up is Trump. So Trump, basically everyone was like the general complaint, you could say, issue with Trump was like the base damage wasn't like average, and there was not much added effect, so this couldn't be played. But now Trump, instead of 3 hits, the hits are 4. Like the average damage has gone lower, but as you know, those who play the AoE archetype and the multi-hit archetype, with the extra hit, that's like bonus, that feather damage you can provide with the rage damage, like buff damage. So Trump can hit really hard now. So excited to see how like the multi-hit players incorporate Trump into their decks. Next up, Cloud. Cloud has gotten a rework, sort of, you can say buff. So first off, now it also provides like 5 heal. So why the 5 heal onto the card? Because now you'll be able to apply like your white sages onto the cloud. Like previously, like you couldn't really utilize it, so that's an added bonus. On top of that, the main effect of cloud is like really good now. You get your free retain, and like if you have less than 5 days of feathers, you get 2 feathers. Otherwise you get a feather dagger. So like for the like multi-hit and feather archetype, cloud is going to be like really good, especially with the retain and the ability to put charms onto it, like white sage. And next one is an interesting one, the last one. So last one has got a pretty interesting buff. So first of all, the base damage is increased, but now you can even further enhance this card's attack damage if you have like 10 bonus damage per non-attack card in your hand. So like let's say like per non-attacker, so anything like skill cards, secret cards, it's gonna enhance the power of the last one, and it's gonna hit really hard. Like if you can pull out the proper combo, like the last one is gonna hit pretty hard now. So yeah, we hope we're gonna see more usage of this card. Next is post fight. Like post fight, the base damage was always good, like 90 base damage always good, but we felt like the HP loss, so like the negative effect of the card was too high, so we've toned it down a little bit. Now you only lose 15 HP, which isn't really much, especially for just the base damage that it provides, that is like 90. So let's see how players incorporate this card into their decks. Now moving on to like bugs. So bugs have gotten like buzz. Now it was a little tough to reach those conditions for the bonus damage for buzz. So we have increased the bonus damage. Like the cap is still 630, but it'll be more easier to hit like hard with the buzz. And it also competes now, like if as a back card, like AoE teams generally go with Tri-Feather. So now there's another card in competition there. So you can either choose like Tri-Feather in some of your axes for those feather gains, or if you have a hard hitting axis, you can choose to go Buzz with that. Like that's up to the players to theorycraft, and I think Buzz is a pretty good card now. And next is Thorny Caterpillar. Like this was like Goo is a very good archetype, like very good curse archetype that can be made, but like they didn't really have a very good finisher. And Thorny was like the previous Thorny, it was a little difficult to achieve those higher damage values, and now you've increased the base damage to 120 and like 10 damage per Goo in your deck, so like it will scale very easily now, and it can hit really hard if you have a proper Goo deck built in. We've seen some like even earlier some very high hitting Thornies, but it wasn't like always easy to reach those damage values, but now it'll be a more easier. Next up is Earwing, probably the most popular card in the game for like the AoE archetype. So Earwing, the base damage was like pretty high. It was like 105 if I'm not wrong, like the max base damage it could do, like for the total damage. So we've toned it a little bit. Now there's like 5 base damage reduction. So overall you could say like 15 base damage for the AoE is being reduced. So even though that is a minor change, like Earring is still a very good usable card, but it's not like straight away like providing too much good value. And next up is a pretty interesting change. Like, so this is another card where some players think it's a nerf, some players think it's a buff. It all depends on how you're theory crafting and building your deck. So Scry earlier, whether you like got those energy fragments from scrying or not, it will always banish. But now it's like if you discard at least like one skill or secret when scrying, you will gain energy fragments and then banish. But if you do not discard skill or secret cards while scrying, that card will not banish, and you will be able to use larva like again. And I'm sure like there are some people already theory crafting how they can use this ability of larva to not banish and like use it over and over again, especially with the Fate Maker rune that we have, which Hale will talk about later on. And so yeah, exciting like times ahead for the discard users. Larva can probably shine very good today. And next up, another spear card. Now onto the plants, we have like bamboo spear. So this is like another one of those spear cards, right? That can provide like really good value, especially with the leaves being given to all the spear honors. So like let's say for feather spear, you have to like build up a really AoE type, multi-hit type archetype. But like bamboo spear, you get leaves, and leaves are like always valuable. So this is gonna like hopefully bring on some really good, interesting mid-range decks. Like players were already theory crafting with this, will using with Leafy and stuff like that. So yeah, excited to see that. Next up is Strawberry Shortcake. Just numerical buffs. The 40 heal wasn't like that much sought after and that much valuable, but so we have adjusted the heal to 50. So for 2 energy you get like base 50 heal, and then 2 strawberries that also have this heal base 50, which obviously can be increased. So strawberry can provide like pretty good value for its energy cost now. Next up is Leafy. This card also received a minor damage boost because as we saw, earlier Leafy used to be a really good archetype, but now like with the power level increase in like multiple other archetypes, Leafy had like fallen behind a little. So now you'll see like Leafy is able to compete on those power levels now, especially like combining it with the other changes. Leafy can probably like hopefully it will the Leafy like guys will come back. Okay, next up Potato Leaf, just a minor stat enhance to be in line with the other secret cards. So as you know, like most of the secrets are like 70 shield, and Potato Leaf was the only one lagging behind with like 5 shields. So yeah, we just leveled it up with all the secrets to be in line with 70 damage. 70 shield. So yeah, that's it for plants. Next is reptiles. So first reptile card to get a change is Sidebarb. So the Sidebarb, like the value that it provided was good, but the problem was the randomness. If you're a poison user, you really, sometimes this enemy has one main Axie that their carry that you need to take out, and the randomness of Sidebarb didn't really help with it, right? So now you have the ability to target any enemy, so you really focus up that poison and like take down that main carry faster. So we are hoping to see like more aggressive poisons come in, like let's say side barbs, like your grass snakes, and attacking that one main carry, taking him down. So yeah, that's going to be pretty interesting to see. Next is the Scaly Spear. As with other spear cards, it got the buff, like the 5 damage buff, and your spikes will now go to the other spear honors also. So like the spear category in itself has received like a very unique buff, and like the amount of possibilities, like it has opened up like multiple avenues. You can create many different types of teams, like depending on whatever you play. Like you can probably insert a spear in there and get good value out of it, right? And next is the last card to get a change, that is probably the most talked about, Topaz. So with Topaz, you see like many players have seen like in season 3, like the reason why Topaz was too strong. Like for some it's the rune, for some it's the damage, for some it's the speed. Well, mainly like Topaz is supposed to be a scaling card, right? You use your put your resources in for the card to scale higher and to do higher damage per energy, right? But what's happening was like it was scaling too fast. So we adjusted that number. Instead of like dealing 15 bonus damage per card in banish pile, now it's been reduced to 12. Now like you might see like some players still saying like the card is still too strong because the like cap wasn't adjusted, like total damage isn't adjusted. But like we believe with the like these minor numbers also like impact a lot, especially at the highest level, right? Like you might just see like 3 bonus damage reduction, but like when you see this in play, like just a 1 turn difference affects like the games at the highest level a lot. So yeah, so hopefully Topaz will still be strong, but not like as strong as it was, like speeding up too fast. And like some keep the argument like the why not deal like 10 bonus damage only for each card in your banish spell. But that is how Topaz was earlier, and it was never used. Like not a single person used it, and the main reason was it wasn't just that good enough to be usable. So we hope like 12 is the sweet spot for Topaz, for it to be still be competitive but not be extremely just be straight out better than the others. So yeah, that's it mostly for the card changes. Hale, you wanna take on the runes and charms?
Sure, absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, Jaster. And yeah, uh, definitely like a lot of these changes really were just numerical in nature, but then like some of them are really interesting, especially the spear cards. I've seen a lot of people theory crafting some mid-range ideas, and they're talking about tri-spikes and leafies and whatever it is they want to do. And I think that's always something that's exciting to see with every new season, where new possibilities exist and we're activating these parts that don't really see much use, and not necessarily just like in the top 100, top 10, but like even in the top 1,000, top 10,000, like you just won't see like these parts in much use at all. And we do know people have them out there, so we want players to have that option. To just generally, like if you enjoy the team, then you should be able to play it. All right. So thank you for that. And yeah, let's talk about the charms and runes. I say charms first because there actually only was two. And nothing too exciting here. These were actually two of the new mystic charms that were introduced in season three. We had Mad Moon Mask for the beasts, which um, it's a very difficult charm to use, especially how it prevents you from gaining any energy fragments with the card that you place it on. And so to offset that risk, we've buffed up the bonus that you get from it, hopefully to make it a little bit more attractive, a little bit more worthwhile for its downside, and we'll see where it goes. Same to say with Oak Bud. Oak Bud was actually a very interesting card that was introduced where it did its conversions from the attacks you do or the shields you place to convert them into damage. And I think going from 30 to 40 does feel like a big jump. And for the I think like one of the bits here that we're also trying to activate is being able to provide players or maybe like sustained players with alternative ways to win their games, because I'm sure many of you have experienced the grueling face off of having to go all the way to the end of Blood Moon, and maybe we can entice these players to explore alternative means to find their victories. And Oakbud is definitely one of those options that is available to them. And we'll be talking about another option which will be available to them sooner, which is in the runes. For the rare runes, we have two. One is Frail Egg, and the other is Destiny Leaf. Destiny Leaf is the old Memento Leaf, which basically so no play. Pretty much because AoE is running around and summons tend to die, and you often you'll lose any value if your summon dies early. But then this time, Destiny Leaf actually gives you a benefit when your summon dies, which is an 8% damage done to the closest enemy based on the current health of the rune holder. So again, in line with what I mentioned earlier for Oakbud, we are trying to provide players with more options to explore with how they go about their matches. And I think Destiny Leaf, like we can't promise that it's going to be exactly where it needs to be, but if someone explores the rune itself, and maybe we'll see something interesting. For leg, nothing too particularly interesting here. Just 10 damage added on to whichever target receives the weak bonus or the weak debuff rather. This is a little bit in line with the design birds have, where they just kind of randomly throw damage in and around. I think Secret Egg is a very good parallel to what Frail Egg does, apart from them both being eggs. Just and I think like the biggest draw that you get from this 10 damage chip is quite similar to how Purge and Detect work, where they were given that 10 damage as well. And it's a great way to be able to kind of peek and just like a shield check whether or not like a particular enemy has any shields on it. Granted, it's random, but then it is rare. So if you do want to have more on, then you can. And so moving on, we have the epic runes, for which we have quite a few actually, which is like 1, 2, 3, 6 of them. Many of these are actually just numerical, and generally that's kind of the direction, as mentioned in the intro, kind of the direction a lot of these changes go, where we see a rune or charm or part and it's not quite doing as well as we hope for it to do. We just kind of bump it up and just kind of raise it a little bit, not too much because we don't want to break anything, right? But then just enough to maybe make it a little bit more interesting to kind of cross over these breakpoints that players have in their heads. And the same goes for the opposite direction, where if something's doing a little bit too well, maybe pushing out other options from the meta, that's when we kind of have to see them tone down a little bit, not to the point where they're unplayable, but ideally unplayable, not unplayable, but at the very least to make them more comparable or within the same league as other options. So to kick it off with the epic runes, the beasts have actually gotten a lot of attention here with Glorious Mane, Pangolin Scale, and Reckless Hunter, all of which are actually just numerical. But then I think Glorious Mane was a rune that actually got a lot of attention back in the season 3 off season while it was still broken or bugged, and players were hitting crazy amounts of damage in the 300 400 range, and that was a bug, by the way. So it was fixed. It became a little bit more reasonable, but not reasonable enough for players to consider it. So front to back beasts kind of fell off the meta, and I think Glorious Mane should allow players to sort of build up that scaling they might look for, especially in when it comes to like matches against mid range or sustain. Pangolin Scale and 18% bumped up to 20%. It's not a whole lot, honestly. But I guess like a consideration with how a lot of these flat damage increases have come about. as Jaster's talked about in the card changes. I think it should make it a little bit more attractive in the Epic era. Reckless Hunter, I think, is a very big change. This was a very popular rune in season 2, particularly when front to back beasts were actually a little bit more viable. It became a little bit too reckless with the 50% damage you take from any damage source, and that especially hurt when it came to AoE. And so we've taken it down. It's no longer minus 15%. You only take 10% this time around. So hopefully that's a little bit more reasonable. 25% in exchange for 10% is quite good. So we'll see. We'll see. And lastly, we have the last 3 here. I think I'll talk about Healing Force first. Healing Force was a rune that primarily saw a lot of play in AoE. And granted, it was, I think the math came out to about 60 points of heal and damage value per turn. And for a lot of people, that's a lot, right? If you think about like other charms or, other runes, usually it's around in the 40-50 range. So instead of 4 damage per living ally to all your enemies, now it's 3. So instead of being able to do 12 damage across the board, now it's 9. And while it might not be a whole lot, it does add up, especially when it comes to the AoE matchup. And this is not necessarily like a direct nerf towards AoE, while I understand it feels that way because there's a lot of AoE out there. It's actually because of the reason that Healing Force was kind of just this rune that you could put on any composition and it would just work. Like Poison was using it, like random sustains were using it, and AoE was using. Everyone could use Healing Force because it was just that good. And so it's a little bit in line with how when we touched on Moonlight Thief some season ago, where it was also one of those runes where it's just like, why wouldn't you run Moonlight Thief? And in this case, why wouldn't you run Healing Force? So that's the reasoning behind the reduction. And next is Leech, which is a little bit more in line with the discussion we'll have later on with Holy Prayer. And I think the best way I can compare this to a previous change, just for context or a precursor, would be maybe Silence Whisper. I like a lot of games, and admittedly, we do have the archetypal RPS that happens where some matchups are just difficult by the nature of what your team does and what your opponent's team does. But then some matches get extremely difficult when your opponent happens to have a rune that is just extremely good against what you do. Leech is one of those runes. And so when you play as Sustain or any team that highly depends on shield, someone shows up with a Leech and the party's just kind of over. Granted, it's only a 40% reduction down to 35, so 5%. But then again, we are trying to be a little bit more conservative when it comes to these changes. So we don't want to kill the rune off immediately, but then we also wanted to maintain a little bit of its power. So I feel, personally, this is just me, if you find yourself in a bracket or a meta which is heavily Sustain favored or heavily just shield invested, perhaps, then maybe it's time to crack out the Leech. But then again, we don't want this rune to just be like you put it on and then like that's it. We don't talk about anything else. And the last among the epic runes is Fate Maker, which is actually very interesting. So Fate Maker, it raised a few eyebrows. I would say that much on its release. This is one of the new ones that came out in season 3, and the biggest bit about it really was that it was limited to the Axie that was actually wearing it. So all the discards to trigger the effect of Fate Maker previously had to come from that specific Axie. We did last minute buff it in season 3 where we removed that limit where you could only do it once, so you'd be able to do it more often. But then again, like one Axie can only have so many discard cards. And so in this case, this time in season 4, we made it so that any of your Axies, any source of discarding, be it targeted discard, random discard, scrying, clearing, nerdy, pink cheek, the like, so from any source from your team, it will trigger the effect. And there is now that additional bonus, which is, I guess if I had to compare it, it'll be a little bit more in line with like Curse Ritual, where every time you do discard a card of your opponent, which has some base value, you are able to deal some damage to the owner of that card. So obviously it's still a very random effect because you don't really have much control over whose card gets discarded in the first place. But then the chip damage should help with that. I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to playing this in their Jinx teams because Jinx is kind of already in a position where it brings at least maybe 4 or so discard cards. But then of course it's going to have to compete with the other runes that they take with them. All right. And that is all for the epic changes, I believe. And moving on to Mystics, we've got, how many is this? This is like 7 different changes. Not really a change to the Mystic rune itself. Talking about Brutal Claw. Brutal Claw did see some attempts to make it work, but then players found it to be a little bit difficult because the amount of bleed you needed to put on in the first place, because the rune itself doesn't place bleed, right? So you need to have effects either through your cards or your charms that do place bleed ahead, but the rune itself doesn't. And it made it harder because Bloodstorms, when they did trigger, they ate up as many as three turns of bleed. And 3 turns is on your turn when it's removed. By the time it's your turn again, you've already lost another 2 because it bounces back to your opponent and then back to you. And that's really punishing because then you have to find another source of bleed to keep the party going. This time around, Bloodstorms will only remove 1 turn of bleed, which should make maintaining the cycle of dealing damage and doubling bleed stacks a little bit more, a little easier to maintain. And moving on, we've got Feather Descent. It's, it's a very innocuous change. We've gone from 1 feather per turn to 2, and granted, it's 100% increase. We can call it that, right? But then, in a way, it's a little bit more in line with runes such as Endless Anger or Metamorphosis, where they're giving 2 of whatever class buff it is. And so, in effect, what this should allow the player to do is hit those 10 stacks of feathers more often and be able to kind of just unload a barrage of feather daggers on their opponent, whether or not they prepare for it or not, right? So we have luckily fixed the auto end bug. As far as I know, it's been fixed. So for all of you AoE players out there, the suffering has ended. And hopefully you should be able to enjoy this rune if it's one thing you pick up. Granted, I understand it's not the greatest compared to things like Endless Anger, which is more popular from the AoE side. But then I'm sure someone will probably try to figure out some way to maximize these additional feathers that are being gained. And moving on, we have Raven's Tactic. And so Raven's Tactic was Epic Rune rather, and we did rework it into a Mystic. And admittedly, it's still kind of finding its place. In the previous season, it saw little to no play, and this time around, Raven's Tactic has been given the base amount of 15% damage. So at the very least, when you're not actually activating it, it does something off the bat, right? It doesn't start from 0. And a lot of players tend to focus very heavily on the healing aspect of the rune, where it consumes all of the feathers on this Axie to heal the team. And I've seen players thinking, so how do I get 10 feathers on this to heal my team for 10 HP? It's not really the point of the card for you to be able to heal your team through feathers. Rather, it's kind of just the opposite end of the card, where you're sacrificing the utility of feathers to be able to access immediate multipliers of up to 45%. Right, so feathers, in retrospect, if you compare it to, say, Feather Descent, is more of a tempo scaling. Over time, you get stronger and deal more damage. Whereas if you build around it with Raven's Tactic, you'll be able to get your damage much sooner because all you have to do is activate it. And I think this might be a little bit easier to do with the recent changes to Keep, but then we'll talk about the mechanic changes to Keep later on. And moving on, we got Metamorphosis. Metamorphosis was a card that started at 10% per cocoon to deal damage based on whatever amount of shields you had left over, and players kind of broke it during the off season. So people were killing Axies left and right as early as round 3, if I'm not mistaken. And so it had to be toned down. We brought it down from 10% down to 5%, and unfortunately that was apparently a little bit too much. So this time we're again moving it back up again. It's back to 7%. We'll see if this is the magic number, and hopefully, again, as mentioned previously, maybe it gives sustain or shield teams or mid-range teams something that they can play with. And what else? I'll save the best for last, because I know there's a rune here that all of you are dying to hear me talk about. So we'll go to Soul Eater first. All right, so Soul Eater is a very interesting card. I think in general, players sort of have this aversion towards anything that has this negative effect first, and then you get your benefit later on. Soul Eater will consume 66 HP from whatever unit, not Axie unit, on your side of the board to provide your entire team with a 6% base increase. And so it's a lot more than it was previously, because now you don't run that risk of, well, what if you do all this work with your soul leader and then they just killed your soul leader Axie, which had all those buffs, right? So it's not very good. In this case, depending again on how you build your team, if you have a lot of cards with base values that are waiting to be buffed, then there's a lot of value to be had, and it really is going to come down to creativity on how players decide on how they want to, manage the exchange that happens. And next to the last, we have Shade Exchange. So Shade Exchange has been sort of just teetering in this place of like, it's fallen into its shadow of itself, where Shade Exchange was just like absolutely crazy in season 0, season 1, back when it was partnered with Holy Prayer, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And the design of Shady Exchange initially came with voids, and players, what they did was they just had curse removal to remove the voids, completely avoiding the balance that was supposed to come with the rune. And we've moved the activation of this rune from the 3rd round to a whole round earlier, which is going to be in round 2. So only for your first 2 turns will you lose 2 energy fragments, which of course you could just spend on keep now that keep has changed. But again, you'll have to do something with them, otherwise they go somewhere else. And following on the 2nd round, then you'll start earning 3 energy fragments per round, which will of course ramp you towards the mid-range. It's probably not the greatest for decks that want to get business done as early as possible, but then maybe better for mid-range as well as sustain teams. And last but not the least, maybe the most exciting, is probably Holy Prayer. So Holy Prayer has gone down from a whole 2 curses removed per beginning of your turn down to 1. And for the most part, the reason for this is very much similar to the reasons we gave for Leech, which was you basically slap Holy Prayer on and you're good to go. Granted, in the highest level, this wasn't necessarily the case. There were cases where maybe Curse would still win out the Holy Prayer match, and you'd need a little bit more extra. But then this is one of those cases where you have one aspect of the game, and it essentially pushed away everything else that tried to do anything similar. So all the curse removal stuff wasn't necessary, and you just go Holy Prayer, and you were good to go. And so, understandably, like we've seen a lot of commentary from the community saying, well, the alternatives aren't very good. And all of this was prior to the change to the mechanics that came out today, specifically Keep, which should help players in that matchup a little bit more, because I think one of the strongest parts of Curse, or at least fighting Curse, is the fact that as you go along on your second set, together with the discards and the amount of deck rot or the jinxes that are sitting in your deck, you run out of options to play. But then with the newly introduced Keep mechanic, which of course we knew about, but then couldn't announce as early as possible, it should make the matchup a little bit more manageable. This doesn't necessarily mean that we're 100% sure that's how it's going to go. Obviously, players can get more creative. There are a lot of new tools out there. The meta landscape will change a little bit, but then we'll have to see. And that is all for the runes and charms that have changed for season 4. Unless I missed anything.
Right.
I'm not sure if did I miss anything?
No, I think you covered all of them.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Yeah, and I think we'll talk about the balance mechanics next. I think we've got like some hands being thrown up here. The balance mechanics shouldn't take too long to chat about, I think, Jess, or what do you think? Do we get the balance mechanics done first and then we'll do Q&A after?
Yep. Let's finish the balance mechanics.
All right, awesome. You can take it away. Let's hear about Keep.
Yeah, I'll start with the first really major change, we can say, right? So Keep, instead of consuming an energy to keep your card, you can use energy fragments. It will consume energy fragments to keep your cards. So the way it works is let's say in your turn, the first Keep will consume 1 energy fragment, and every subsequent Keep will have 1 extra energy fragment cost. So the second will cost 2, the third Keep will cost 3 in that particular turn, and on the next turn that will reset, and your first Keep will again cost you 1 energy fragment. And if you have any additional energy remaining in a turn, let's say if a card is in your hand and you cannot play those energies, then that will automatically convert into energy fragments, and that is 1 energy fragment per 1 unused energy that you had. So yeah, that's pretty much basically how it works. And the reason it is such a major change is like currently, see sometimes you can have really bad draws, right? Your match started, and in the first round one or round two, you drew some really important cards that you needed towards the end. You cannot play them, so keep helps you there. It opens up doors for multiple combos to be played. And I see like a lot of chatter about like cards is being too strong. There's no counter. So like a smart player can now choose when to keep like which important cards to keep at certain times, right? And like really, if you are able to manage your deck, control it like properly, then like there's like so many opportunities now for different teams. And like one thing I would say is like I play tested it a lot, and it makes almost every team better. Like for every most of the rounds you have like options. Do I keep this card now? Like maybe I would need it 3 rounds later, and I might not get it back in the reshuffle, so I just keep it to use in that situation. Maybe I would need it in the next round. So like overall, like this single mechanic, like this keep change opens up so many doors. And I'm sure like like I saw some comparisons, like it gives classic vibes. And yeah, it kind of does, like just the fact that there's more control in your deck, right? Whatever cards you draw, there's more control. And it also opens up like different decisions that you need to make. Let's say those who use like cottontail teams, right? So do you use energy fragments right now, like for the cottontail? And like what if you got some like really important card you need to keep, so that delays your burst turn with the cottontail? So yeah, pretty like exciting things that are gonna open up with keep. All right, yeah, that should be like mainly it.
Yeah, I think it's the keep change is probably the biggest twist to all of these changes that we're looking forward to for season 4. And in general, a lot of these, I think that when it comes to these two mechanics, and we'll talk about the next one. I think when it comes to these two mechanics, it really goes along with making sure that players are given these opportunities to play the cards they actually get. And granted, the biggest challenge there is the fact that at the end of every turn, we do discard our cards. So there are choices that do need to be made where you choose like which of these cards do I play? Do I sacrifice my development, which is the energy fragments, and delay my energy burst so that I can hold on to this card? And it should smooth out all of these experiences. I'm pretty sure most everyone in chat has had these moments where you start turn one, you draw 3 cards, and they're all 3 cards that you wish you could play. One of them you do, one of them gets discarded, the other one you'll keep with your free retain, or sorry, with your free keep. Now, with the energy you spent on the first card you played, you'll get a fragment, and you can spend that fragment to hold on to the 3rd card and be able to potentially play it later on. So this does put a lot of power in the players' hands, where they're able to hang on to these important cards and not have to wait an entire deck cycle before they're able to play them again.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
So,
one thing I would like to mention for keep, like it's not something like you just start playing with the new mechanic, and you just have mastery over it. Like in my experience, what I observed was like first few games I had no clue how to use this mechanic. And like after playing few games I realized like it's an actual like proper deck control skill that I have to develop. I have to like think of so many different things. And I'm like excited to see like the skill levels being increased just because of this mechanic now.
All right, awesome. Yeah, and on top of that, I think like Jassy also mentioned that I just want to clear up, because there was a few frequently asked questions when the mechanics came out. Number one, yes, the cost to keep will reset every turn. So your first keep will always cost 1 energy fragment, the second will cost 2, and the third will cost 3. On your next turn, the first will cost 1 again. So it's not a permanent increase, don't worry. And to the second point, for the energy that's left over, the reason why it was added in as a mechanic where any energy you have left over is then converted into energy fragments was, well, of course, you can't keep to earn fragments anymore. And if you find yourself in a position where your hand contains cards and you can't play all of them, then you're not going to fall behind just because you can't spend your energy. Well, I mean, you will fall behind because you didn't spend your energy. You lose a little bit of tempo, but then at least not on the fragment side of things. All right, so let's talk about the last change, which is the change to round 3, where players 1 and 2 will
Round
now
two.
draw 4. Yeah, round 2. Round 2, turn 3 and 4, where players will draw 4 cards each instead of what they used to. And just to refresh everyone's memory, player 1 on round 3 would draw 3 cards for the 2 energy they had, and player 2 would draw 5 cards for the 2 energy they had. And as I'm sure plenty of you have experienced being player 2 on round 4, you really run into this dilemma where it's like, I have all these cards, but I only have so much energy to actually play all of them. And players have found ways around this, which is the use of Scotch tape or the class-based retain cards. Oh, but then, like, otherwise, you can also use zero cost cards, but it's not a reliable way to be able to maximize the amount of cards you actually draw on that round. And so this is something that we wanted to address because we actually looked into it, and 22% of all potential points played within, I think it was like the top 1,000 or so, went towards Scotch tape. So players really want to hold on to their cards. And so it's together with these changes, with Keep, of course, which makes it a lot easier to do, and not forcing players to overdraw cards. And if anyone remembers, the scaling of resources, which is cards and energy, was actually introduced in season 0. One card in particular was a major consideration when it came to the amount of cards players would draw. Wild guess, chat. Which card do you think this is? Wild guess. I think a lot of you will get it, but then season 0, season 1. What was a card that you wanted to have an even number of extra cards at the end of your hand for? Cottontail? Nah, it's not Cottontail. It's not. Pop quiz. The only one person has gotten it right. maybe I had a little bit too much. Yeah, it's okay. It was Nemo. Nemo, back in the day when it was giving you 1 energy, you wanted to have 2 cards in excess with the energy you had. And at the time, player 1 had his ridiculous win rate. I think it was like 60% plus or whatever. And that's actually a very big reason why they only had 2 energy and 3 cards. Because we didn't want them getting Nemo value at that point, and that stuck around. All the way since season 0 down to here. So now card draw is +2 on top of whatever amount of energy you do have. This does change a few things for different decks, so it's an adjustment. I'm not going to call it a buffer nerf because it really depends on how you play with it, and we're fairly confident that players are going to adjust accordingly. So yeah, I think those are all of the changes. I think we can address a few of these questions here. I think one of the burning questions we've seen a lot of is when patch, right? And this has actually been previously discussed, and unfortunately, the patch is going to have to wait. You can expect the patch to come together with the reasons why it's waiting when the season does begin, and this isn't a final thing. Maybe there's a chance that the patch comes earlier on the beta server, maybe. But for the meantime, we are going to have to wait a little bit longer, not too much longer, because it was said that we're expecting it in mid-May. Again, not final, right? But then trust, what is to come is very exciting. It's unfortunately not what this town hall is for, so we're not going to be talking about it. And do look forward to it, I think. I think it's going to be very interesting. And I think, yeah, let's see if we have any other questions in questions chat. Do feel free to raise your hands. I think we can do something interesting. Normally we do a question and answer. We'll still do question and answer, but then we'll also consider anyone who feels strongly about the direction season 4 is going to go. We'd love to hear what it is. We'd love to hear what your declaration or what your prediction is going to be. So if you'd like to come on stage and share with everyone which way you think things are going to go, what's the sleeper comp, or don't tell us what the sleeper comp is, because then it's not a sleeper anymore. But then it's going to be a very interesting conversation. So yeah, feel free to raise your hands. We'll bring you on the stage. We'll have a nice chat, and the floor is open. That is pretty much it. I think Prometheus has had his hand up for quite a while here, so let's
Yeah.
bring him on.
Hello, guys.
Hello, Prometheus.
Hey.
Long time no see you. I'm glad to be here as always. I'm always in the townhouse, right? I just wanted to thank you guys for a handsome season, an awesome season. Season 3 was very, very, very good. You guys did a really well job in most of the aspects that we told about the last townhouse on the season 2, right? One thing that I need to mention and congratulate you guys is that when season 2 Town Hall happened, I mentioned bugs, discard, and control capabilities, right? So when I told that, and everyone imagined that you guys would probably change the skills, right? The parts, the cards, like the actual cards. But you guys did a really smart job by doing additions to the runes and charms so they can be more useful without changing the actual skills, right? So you guys made Mantis Dagger, for example, and the snail, Lazy Snail, I think. So that was a really cool thing because you guys changed how the parts were supposed to work by doing a non-intrusive change because you guys changed another thing. And this is a very important thing in Origins, right? Because we have these runes and charms mechanics. So when we are doing like patching, those things like buffing, nerfing, etc., we can do those changes to the runes and charms instead of like reworking a card. I know that some cards really need to be balanced, right? But most of the times, the reason behind they are broken or not, it's because of the runes and charms, right? So that's a really good thing that you guys did. And speaking of which, I think that for example, this last patch, right, from this seasonal changer that you guys already mentioned in this town hall, was really, really focused towards these runes and charms balancing, right? Because we had, for example, AoEs. You guys didn't nerf directly AoEs, right? You didn't rework at any card. You didn't hardly nerf any card, but the summarizing of like nerfing a little bit of leech, nerfing a little bit of healing force, nerfing a little bit of whirlwind, did a really, really good nerf summarizing everything up. So that's a good thing because now we don't have intrusive runes, but we still have a balancing. That's a really good thing. I just want to talk briefly about two things that I'm thinking about that most of people are talking into the chat, right? It's about Last Stand and Holy Prayer, right? So Last Stand works a little bit weird. I don't know why. It cleanses when it activates, and I think this doesn't make sense because of the description, right? If it's intended, we should change the description, or if it's not intended, like remove this interaction.
It's actually it is intended. It is part of it, and it should be added to the description. Absolutely, that is actually the old effect of Last Stand. Last Stand, as we remember it, in its initial inception, actually did the exact same thing. But then, of course, for any player who came in later on, they wouldn't know that. So, 100% agree, and making it so that the texts or the rules of these cards and runes and charms are exact to, or not exact, but then rather as they read.
Up to date, right?
And up to date and up as they read, so players can expect. I think like a good example was Healing Force, and Healing Force read very strangely all throughout season 3, and that's actually been corrected. It was actually mentioned in the Canva that we made it updated for clarity, and so we are looking forward to doing a bit of an overhaul when it comes to the text of runes and cards and terms. For the most part, trying to minimize the amount of text that's on there while still preserving the idea or the thoughts so the players aren't a little bit too lost with what happens. It's a bit of a challenge with things like Navaga and tassels, etc. But then we'll do our best.
Oh, thanks, Hayo. That's a pretty nice thing to hear. That's perfect. The players community would love to hear those things, right? Because
Yeah.
sometimes the community feels that you guys don't are actually like caring about the game or caring about the community. But I know that you guys did this. Like I know that you guys care. But it's good to hear those things because now they will actually know
Yeah.
that you guys are caring, right?
Yeah.
So
Thank
the
you
next
for
thing
me, yes.
about no problems. I just want to talk faster because I know that we have a lot of topics. Sorry if
Oh, it's okay.
I
Oh,
interrupting.
no, go ahead. Take your time. We're waiting for the next hand to come up anyway. Go for it.
So the next thing about Last Stand, it's the Winghorn interaction because Winghorn deals 0 damage when hitting a Last Stand user, right? So for me, it makes no sense because even with Last Stand like active, it shouldn't be working that way. It shouldn't be like dealing 0 damage to them. It should be like okay, you make a flag in the programming, right? That the unit cannot die while Last Stand is active. So you can still do damage, you can still proc effects while it's active, but it will just not die, right? I don't know if it's too hard to make that, but the way it works now is a little bit weird because, for example, you can generate feather daggers while hitting with Winghorn, but you should be able to, right?
Yeah, that's
Because
actually it has been recorded as a bug. So because the last one Axie is on like basically 0 HP, it's just surviving for that turn. So dagger should generate. That is a bug, and it has been recorded.
Okay, all right.
Awesome.
The last thing I want to talk about it's Holy Prayer, right? That's a very important thing that I will want to say. I am known as a Jinx main user, right?
Okay.
So that's a thing. I know that Holy Prayer was a very oppressive room that like completely inviabilized curse deck comps, right? I had 0% win rate in the top 100 against Holy Prayer's users, and they were like everyone was using it, right? But it's okay. I still made it to the top 100. It's fine. But now it only removing one curse card. People are complaining already about it. So I personally don't want my deck to die, like to get harding nerfed because it's now is too strong on quotes, right? Because people will complain about it. Of course, they always complain. But something that is interesting that I think we have already odd round mechanic, right? In some runes. For example, collect and protect. It works like one turn you get one benefit, and the other you get another.
Yeah,
right?
I think I've seen this. I've seen this pitch before, where one turn you do one, the next turn you do two.
Exactly.
It's an interesting direction, and it's really more of like a bargaining kind of thing. Where can we not do one? Can we do 1.5? And generally, like I really want to stress that these decisions were not just like darts on a dartboard, right? So a lot of thought does go into it. Design does mull over like it's not just a direct thing, right? Because like you have other considerations such as how like the new keep mechanic is out now, and it's going to be a massive tool for players who are fighting against curse not to have their hands brick versus things like jinx. So it's not supposed to be the end all be all or the be all end all where you slap Holy Prayer on your team and then you just don't think about curses anymore. And understandably, it's not the case because like maybe some guy is out there running around with like 6 jellyfish, but then how many people are running out with 6 jellyfish, right? So we'll see. And the balancing policy does stand where prior to the epic era, epic things can be updated, and prior to the mystic era, mystic things can be updated. So if we do forecast that there is a problem coming along and a change needs to be done, then it's possible. So for everyone,
right.
yep. Yeah, so I just want to remind everyone that that policy is in place. So you know what, like balancing has plenty of time, or design has plenty of time to think about whether or not these epics and mystics are where they want to be all throughout the season. So this is just the initial. initial points. We're saying like we'll start here, we'll see what happens. If we like where things are going, then it stays the way it is. If we don't, then maybe we'll change something here in one place or another, right?
That's perfect thing to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think it's something that's important to consider.
All right, no problems. Yeah. So thank you so much for the time, for the attention, right? Those were some things that we really need to hear, right? People are now like just not complaining that much in the chat anymore because they know that things can be done and we can like changes in the future. I'm very glad to talk with you guys and thank you very much, Nick.
Yeah, thank you for coming on, Prometheus.
Thanks for coming.
And yeah, like just to touch on like what Prometheus was saying about we have been very sensitive when it comes to the to being able to continue playing the same cards, the same comps in spirit and in essence of what it was across seasons. So like if you find yourself in a position where it's like, oh well, then I can just play my comp from season 3, then wonderful, because that is something that we do want players to be able to exercise like their Axies across multiple seasons and not just be like, oh, the season's coming to an end, I need to get rid of all my Axies because they might not be good anymore in the following. Obviously the highest level tournaments and top 100, top 10, etc. Even the smallest changes do go a long way. But then for everyone else who are climbing a little bit like in the high point of the ladder, mid point of the ladder, I think like all these teams are still absolutely viable. So that is something that we have been trying to be sensitive towards. And we don't have any hands up at the moment. I think we can go through some of these questions that are in the questions only area. Let's see. Okay, everyone, do feel free to raise your hands if you do want to come on stage. No problem. You can ask questions. It's fine. We can't promise to have all the answers. Just as we understand it, as been discussed with the team. If you feel like you just want to express yourself and talk about how you feel about these changes, you're welcome. You're welcome to step up.
Right. Yeah, we can address the questions. Yes, so first is Nino asks, why does poison not deal damage against regenerator before getting cleanse? I think it's mainly the order of operations, right? So regenerator cleanses first, and like if there is poison remaining, it will deal damage. If there isn't, then it will not. That's just how it works. Next up is Alpaca. So I like the idea of buffing sustained damage options like Metamorphosis, Oak, and Destiny Leaf, but isn't Blood Moon still gonna end up outpacing the chip damage, essentially negating it? Yeah, that is like if the chip damage is like too slow, then that is a possibility. But players can like build accordingly, right? Like add some blood specs in there, add some more sources of damage. So their main focus is to like just live long enough so that they can like that damage matters during Blood Moon, right? So, and that is actually how like some people like to play with like these chip damages from tassels and like stuff like that. All right, we have Chuck on stage. Hello Chuck, how are you?
Hey Chuck, welcome here. Yeah, I hope you didn't have to come on stage because it looks like a lot of people are pushing you on here. Welcome on, dude. But we love having you on. How are you been, man?
No, the people want what they want. They want Chuck Fresco on stage. I give it to them.
We give the people what they want.
Yeah. The only issue, I've been tweeting a lot. I've already seen a lot of the changes that came out. But my biggest issue is you guys, and I brought this up in my tweets too. You guys, I forget who it was, Hale or Jatster, brought up the stat that Lotus has a top win percentage versus all these curse cards or whatever. But I'm like, how is that possible when I tried playing Lotus myself and playing against top tier curse decks or jinx decks? It doesn't matter if you have a Lotus in your deck. With Parasite and Neo, they just remove everything. Like, they're so consistently able to draw through your deck. It's almost ridiculous. Like, I don't understand. Like, one of the counters to curse decks should be cards like Lotus, or let's say you want to spend 5 PP on the curse removing charm. I think it's Bean's Blessing. like, and they could just remove it every time like that. Like, I don't know how that's fair mechanics. Like, what's the point of even adding a Lotus to your deck or adding any of these cards? Because it just seems like it's counterintuitive. Not only that, Lotus itself, its stats are really bad for a defense card. So yes, maybe you might have a chance to beat Jinx if they don't happen to discard you with Parasite or Neo, but then you lose against every other matchup because the ear slot is so important. But a 55 defense card that doesn't work on any other matchup besides Jinx just seems awful. Like, I don't know how the balance team could say this is fair. Like, I just don't see it. Can you guys explain that?
Sure, I'll take it because obviously that was my tweet. One, I do agree. I think Lotus could definitely see a little bit more love, and it's in that position where it's like it's great when it's great, and it's not when it's not. And that's not really the kind of card that you can expect to main deck. And it'd be more in line with if you find yourself in a bracket or a meta where it's actually more useful than it's not. Right, and to touch on the tweet itself, you did mention when you go against top tier Jinx, right? So the key point there is top tier. The stats were clearly conveyed, and it was clearly said in the tweet that it was for the top 1,000. And unfortunately, in the top 1,000, it's not necessarily top tier all the way down. So if anything, that's probably where the disconnect comes from. The tweet itself probably attracted as many as 10 pros. It was amazing. I don't think I've ever seen so many pros so willing to give their opinion during the off season, because often they're a little bit more quiet because they don't want people finding out their tech. But then it was a very fun conversation on there. But yeah, for context, for anyone who hasn't seen it, again, the stats were for the top 1,000. This is not going to be able to translate to Chuck's example, which is fighting against top tier curse teams, right? So you're not going to have to worry about that too much in the top 100, top 50, absolutely. Because and I think that's the way that main decking outs works, right? Because curse teams at that level understand that there are certain cards that ruin their plans, and that's why they bring their discards, and it helps very well with the amount of deck rot that they throw into your deck. So if you're unable to play key cards against them, then they're winning, they're running away with it. And in a same sense, it's kind of the same design that a lot of the very early Topaz teams did, where they were running Hungry Bird, because they understood that they didn't do very well against curses. So they brought Hungry Bird along to help them in these matches, and it's kind of like a deck building bit where you have like your plan, and this is what you want to do with the different parts you have, and these outs exist as a means to help you against matchups you're going to have a hard time with, right? So if anything, right, it's a bit of a rock and a hard place thing where Holy Prayer was doing Holy Prayer things, and you just need to slap that on, because I don't think any of the top. Maybe there were a few Topaz teams still ran like some amount of curse removal, but then otherwise they were very happy to just bring Holy Prayer, and it solved all their problems. And that isn't really the design we're looking for, where you solve one thing and all of a sudden one matchup is like it's like a freebie, right? Because I don't think that's good. I don't think that's a good experience either. But on the point of Lotus being not quite where it wants to be, definitely agree with you. I think it's something that we can revisit. It has been raised with the team, but then I think we're still looking to see, because there are a few other points, again, like some other moving parts, such as the keep mechanic, which will impact that matchup.
And if you really figured that out, you're a good player. You have some pretty good chances.
Yeah, I mean, there's other ways of countering curses, like attack builds and stuff, but
for sure,
like really aggressive attack builds.
Yeah, I think front to back attack is something that a lot of people have been very interested in with all these recent changes, especially I think because, again, we keep going back to the keep change, because I think honestly this keep change is just like, it's such a sweeping. It's gonna change the game, but not to the point where you feel like you're playing a different game. It's just gonna feel better, is what I want to say.
And similar to the previous person too, I was actually very surprised that Last Stand was not touched at all by the team, considering when it comes to like attack versus attack matchups, Last Stand is so strong. And now with the new keep mechanic that you guys introduced, someone can in theory just save all his cards, go for a crazy out all attack with 50% increase on every card, it just seems like Last Stand should have been balanced because I mean, at least in the top 100, I saw Last Stand in a lot of teams that were playing. Like it was really, really dominant, and it made it really hard to deal with Topaz teams. Actually, if you're trying to go attack on them, it looked really difficult in my opinion. So I was actually surprised you guys didn't touch that card at all or that room.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you. And like just as we mentioned a while ago, like we do still have that whole window up to when the Mystic era does begin to reconsider it, and we can expect to see a little bit of last stand action either in tournaments or in esports or just in the esports mode that we have. We talk about that because that's been leaked already. Pause 2 has shared the wonderful details of the esports mode that everyone can look forward to. So yeah, I think we're going to be able to gather that data as required, and if it does look like it's still in a really rough spot or in a really strong spot rather, then it's not off the table to look back into.
Okay, yeah, just those were just ideas I had, just because. I mean, I complain on Twitter mostly just because, like, I just see it. Like, I'm not a top player. I am not a pro player. Keep this in mind. Not a pro player here. But just seeing some of these changes just makes me think, okay, if I want to win, I want to play the highest damage build possible that's most efficient. Add in, before it was just add in Holy Prayer or add in something that counters sustain, which is Leecher. And I still think Leecher is too high, in my opinion, honestly, but I'm just going to let it go. I play sustain, so I'm going to let it go. But I do think, like the game almost tailors to high damage builds just especially as it nears the Mystic era. So I just feel like, I don't know, especially like when you see Mystic runes like Metamorphosis that have like, I just see it's a useless rune. When you have a card like, or a rune like Leecher in the game, Metamorphosis is just a joke in the game. That's the way I've always felt. Like, what's the point of this Mystic rune that gets countered by an epic rune like instantly, basically, as soon as you attach?
He cut out also.
You got muted, Chuck.
Oh, did I get muted?
Oh no.
Yeah,
Oh no, you're good now. You're good.
I just said, okay, I just wanted to bring up Metamorphosis, right? This is a rune.
Oh no, we heard that part. It was just at the end. It was just at the end. You're good.
Yeah, like, what's the point of having it when Leecher counters it immediately? It almost seems like Metamorphosis is missing something to it to make it actually useful, because just being pure shield and maybe give some damage, it just seems very weak in my opinion. Like, I don't know, maybe it's an issue that Leecher is really strong, that it makes any form of shield, like even with runes, pointless. Yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah,
I just feel like Metamorphosis should build up to something. Like the mechanic of Cocoon should build up to something where it increases something, like becomes a new form or something. Sort of like a caterpillar being metamorphosis into like a butterfly or something like that. I feel like something's missing on that rune.
Yeah, should be interesting. We'll have to see, honestly, again. And luckily, it is a mystic, so it's just like Last Stand and Holy Prayer. It is something that we can revisit as required, based on like whatever information we can gather from when all this stuff actually does become available to us.
And the consideration is also like, like is Leecher running around that much? Like let's say Leecher is not running around that much. So like, where does that put Metamorphosis now?
Yeah, but then like to Chuck's point, I do 100% agree, and it with the whole idea of like some guy shows up with his Leecher and the party's just over. So that's kind of like the feeling we're trying to avoid. And like if you're running a team that is weak to shields, then maybe bring something that's anti-shield, main deck or somewhere else, right? So we can't just like slap a root on and then like all our problems are solved. Because it sort of it really hurts, I think, the viability of certain decks.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. I think the reason why we're so dependent on these runes like Leecher and Holy Prayer, now that Holy Prayer obviously got adjusted, it's just that there's something wrong inside the card set. There's something wrong in the mechanics that needs to be addressed. But right now we're just putting like a band-aid on it. Like, oh, let's put Shield Leecher, let's do this. But I honestly have always been against those kind of runes because they just feel like auto-win runes. But I do feel that there's something wrong in the cards. I'm not smart enough to figure out the solution for it, but I do feel like that's the reason we just use it.
Yeah, we'll get there. Don't worry. And like a lot of it really is just like trying to fine tune our way to making sure all these cards and aspects or like rules and charms kind of find their fit and like the right number. And a few of them are in pretty good spots. There's a lot of stuff that hasn't been changed for a long time because they're just right. It's like there's just no need to touch them anymore. And with enough iteration, we'll try to get like most of everything there. But
yeah, no, well,
good points all around.
Okay, thank you for having me on stage. Sorry,
Dude,
I complain a lot on Twitter. I complain a lot on Twitter, but that's just because I want better. Like I want a better season than just one comp that I already see overpowered winning. I could be wrong. I see other changes.
Okay, what are your predictions for season 4 then?
I actually was thinking about. I don't want to give my full predictions because I'm trying to build something for a video.
True.
Maybe wasn't caught, but I have been thinking it's going to be really annoying to play against. Really annoying to play against. But we'll see. I see some changes you guys made in other areas that I'm kind of interested in looking at. But until we get the beta server, I won't be sure how strong it is actually.
For sure. But yeah, and we're looking forward to and again, like I think like for everyone who is here, and if you haven't heard the news on the esports server, you can expect the esports server to be brought onto the live server. We are going to be having an esports mode. This was teased by Pos2 on Twitter, and it's basically going to be esports mode. So whatever you had on the esports server is going to be on the live server. So it's just going to be like one app. So no one's going to have to be running around. It's like, is the esports server updated? Is it on the latest patch? But then like it has its own bugs and everything else. So it should be up to date all the time, which should be great.
Oh, one final question for you guys, and this is more interesting. Are you guys doing something with the starter Axies this season? Because I kind of felt I got leaks like on Twitter, like something's happening with them, but I wasn't sure if this is the place where you guys were gonna discuss anything.
As Vince said, something starter, but yeah, there might be another town hall where that stuff gets discussed.
Yeah, there's a few questions in chat which really just aren't the focus of this town hall, unfortunately. So like any changes to the starters, any changes to the season itself, and like all that stuff, we can expect that to come in a future town hall. So this one we're really like shooting more for like the balancing and mechanics things.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Chuck. Appreciate it. Making the people proud. Let's go. All right. And so we are pushing an hour and 20 minutes here. And so unless anyone wants to throw their hands up, I think we can start wrapping things up. I think for the most part, this is a pretty productive town hall. And we're not necessarily sharing too many more insights on these changes because like obviously there's been like wonderful reviews done by the community, and it's great to see that when the players of the community are able to recognize what it is that's trying to be achieved by these changes, it means the changes were done in a correct way. Because like no one's scratching their heads and wondering, it's like, why would you do this? Except maybe for a few things, but most of them hit their marks.
Yep, they still work quite well. Like if you were like top 1,000 last season, like there's still a high chance with the same axis. If you play well, you can pretty much maintain your rank.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so I'm gonna run down the questions only one more time. See if we got any thing that we should cover here. Any changes to bad luck damage? No. Nothing so far with bad luck and jinx. Hypothesis and pros and cons of pigeon post blackmail would be different with the new keep mechanics. That's actually a really good question. Because pigeon post does end up sitting on top of your deck for, well, of course, like every time you don't use it, it goes back. So with the new keep mechanic, you might be able to kind of avoid having to use it right away because you'll only have to spend fragments to be able to hold on to some of the cards that you already have in your hand. And theoretically, you could actually just keep the pigeon post there so that you only draw like one card in excess. But it would really drain away.
Pigeon, the blackmail has a return on it, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because it goes back.
Return has priority over keep, so you cannot keep a return card. It will just go back.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. It's like the cards you still have in your hand, you'll be able to keep those, and so you're not as punished for holding on to like less cards. So it can depend. I think it's gonna have to depend on the matchup because some teams want more cards, some teams are happy to draw one less. So we'll see. Star going over 100%, not intended. That's probably a bug. So we'll have to look into it. Thank you for that, Robocop. Bloodlust feels like an epic rune. Well, again, it's one of those mystics. So if in practice or in esports or in tournaments we see that it's kind of lacking, then there's the possibility that it sees a buff. But then for now, not yet. And Leafy Buffware, you got your 5 damage identity. We'll see. We'll see. I think honestly with the bamboo spear change, Leafy teams being able to lock and load in one attack is very interesting. I'm not sure what'll be done with it, but I'm pretty sure someone's going to try to do something.
Hello.
All right, we have Shatter on
Hey.
stage. What's up, Shatter?
Shatter, my monster. Welcome on stage. How are you doing, man?
Hey guys, I'm good. How are you guys?
Doing good, man.
Good.
Can you guys
seeing
hear
you.
me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. How have you
Okay.
been?
Well, I'm good. I'm with my kids at the moment. Gonna try to be short.
Okay.
I'm mostly curious about the adaptive strike rune. Was it the adaptive strike? The mech rune.
Adaptive
Will there be
program?
any changes to it?
Oh,
Yes, adaptive program.
Adaptive program.
Like
Adaptive
the
program.
rune gives you shield and bonus 25%, and then you get additional fragments with it. It seems like a broken rune to me. Will there be any changes to it?
Well, I mean, there aren't any so far, so we'll have to see. It's an epic, so we can keep an eye on it during the rare era. Adaptive program is a bit of a cornerstone for a lot of builds, and considering now that keeping does actually consume fragments, it's gonna see like a little bit of drain there. Obviously, people can use those fragments for keeping, but then those fragments are gonna have to go somewhere. So we'll see.
Yes, you guys would want to see the results of this season. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. In general, everyone like anything that isn't changed, like it's hard. I'm sure like there's always like, hey, is X thing that isn't changed going to be changed? And all I can say is like, well, it's not changed yet, because like it hasn't been. And consideration does go out, but then it's also very difficult to make too many changes because then you're not really going to be able to see like which change achieved the thing we want, right? So if, for example, let's say with sustain, right, there were a few changes that do exist that affect sustain in one way or another, and if we change too many things like adaptive program as well, then it's going to be difficult to find out whether or not those changes were good changes.
Yeah, I understand that, but the adaptive strike with the Dawn Rune rejuvenate, that seem like overpowered combo to me. When we can't really use fragile effect in here, is there any plan like to at least make the fragile effect like the vulnerable one, where you can stack up that?
Yeah, we'll see. I think the status effects in general are very interesting to revisit because they seem to have lost a little bit of their position in the limelight. We have kind of fallen more towards what's it called, runes and charms, kind of taking the place of these debuffs. I don't think we actually even see vulnerable as often anymore. Ever since front to back's kind of fallen off. So yeah. Something that's worth looking into. Again, that's going to be a mechanics change, so it's a little bit unlikely. We're a little bit more loose, or hands are kind of more free when it comes to epics and mystics once the season begins. But yeah, it's a good consideration.
Yeah, okay, that was my questions. Like, I'm pretty much satisfied with how the season is going.
Yeah,
I made the changes to it. I think it's gonna be one of the best seasons that comes. So
yeah,
I'm
awesome.
just glad you guys made these changes to the card mechanic and the keep. It's been talked over, so I don't wanna repeat it. Just saying it's
thanks a lot,
very
Shatter.
good change. Yeah, thanks
Appreciate
guys for having me. Can't speak anymore.
Thanks for coming on.
Goodbye.
That's okay. Bye.
All right. Okay. Next
Hey,
up, we have
Zero. Welcome on.
Hey, Jester. Hey, Hill.
How you
Yeah,
doing, man?
Zero.
All right, good evening. Just want to start by saying you guys are doing a great job staying to your word of making putting more priority on the axes themselves and runes and charms, being keeping the archetypes. That's what Heo and Jaster was trying to build on since they joined the team. Like making every axis, especially those who are bred out or whatever, being agnostic towards every season. And this is the first time I've been having my axes being viable for multiple seasons. So good job on that.
Thank you.
I guess just want to share my thoughts a little bit on mainly Bleed and Hidden Razor. For a Mystic Charm, especially for Hidden Razor, it feels pretty lackluster in terms of the effects it does and the cost of it, right? It's 4 PP, it applies bleed for 2 turns. Sure, you can put it on Chubby, then becomes like a 4-turn bleed, but then it's still pretty and there's no good other beast parts that really work well with it. Dual Blade is only pretty much the other one, and I'm wondering if there's any ideas or any thoughts of making it better, because as a mystic rune, it's pretty lackluster.
Yeah, I think you're talking mainly about the rune, right? Bloodstorm. So
the charm, Hidden Razor.
So Hidden Razor and like Blade in itself, right? As Hill previously talked about, status effects being like pretty little much, out of the limelight because of all the other stuff. So yeah, like mainly I think the case here is just being after the introduction of White Siege, especially, right? We saw like the status effects being like falling out a little. So that is one thing. I think that we can look on how we can improve that. Status effects still maintaining their power and like the like ease of access, you could say. The like as you mentioned, like Hidden Razor, you can mainly it's good on Chubby and Dual Blade. So maybe potentially we can, if it still underperforms, we can potentially look into like an alternative usage of the charm, right? Yeah, that's something we can still look for the future seasons mainly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, well,
that's
not necessarily future seasons. Like it is a mystic, so much like everything else, in practice, if we see that it's not so great, then there's a light, there's a ray of hope that it sees some adjustment prior to the mystic era itself. So why not? Maybe 4 turns for single attacks and 2 turns for AOE multi. It's not too crazy.
Yeah, something like that. Because like 15 damage is like per card use sounds good if somehow all of the cards you draw are on the bleeding Axie, but in practice it's rarely the case. And I like the mystic rune change. It does help quite a lot because I've been experimenting with bleed teams even before this season when Bloodstorm was first introduced. So I think that helps bump up the power levels of it a little bit, but it's just mainly that and Hidden Razor that are making bleed teams not really viable at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. Like another idea I can think of for like Hidden Razor would be like maybe instead of on the target, it's just like straight up when you use his attack, 2 bleed to all enemies or whatever, right? So there's options. Like there's creative ways to improve on these things. So definitely like worth revisiting. We'll ring it up.
Cool. Thanks for letting me up here.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. So yeah, Faz. Faz, welcome on the stage. How are you doing?
I have a invest server in my bio. Come on DM.
Oh, sorry.
Wait, didn't quite catch.
Oh,
what?
He left.
Did he?
He got rugged. He's gone. Maybe. Okay. Thank you, Faz, for coming on stage. Appreciate you. All right, everyone. So it's an hour already into this town hall. And unless we gotta is this fast? Is this you? No, someone else. And he's gone also. All right.
Fast with an alt account.
Yeah. Anyway, everyone, it's been an hour and 30 at this town hall. I think we've gone through quite a lot. There are a few more questions here, and I think we'll just go through the chat and try to reply to you in text. And it's amazing that you've all been here. We do try to take this time slot, especially because it accommodates everyone, unless you live in the Pacific. And so hopefully, you came here and were able to get some of the insight that you were looking for. If not, please do feel free to tag myself or Jatster, either in the server, in questions only, in Twitter, and we'll try to share whatever insight we can with all these changes that are coming. And like for me, I think the thing I'm most excited about is probably the amount of deck control and card control that's going to come with the change to keep, and ever so slightly with these changes to round 2 or turn 3 and 4 for the players, because I sit in streams of a lot of the content creators, and you really can see the frustration that comes with obviously not being able to play the cards we want to play. And granted, like a lot of us did come from Classic, where cards didn't discard every round and you could play the cards whenever you felt like it, but like Origins is just a different beast. But then we're trying to bridge that gap and not make players feel like they've got their backs against the wall and they just kind of have to pick the best 3 things to throw every round. But now it's like you've kind of got this balance of like, do I advance my do I develop my position by gathering more energy fragments and have more energy, more card draw in the middle or the late part of the game, or do I spend my fragments on being able to hold on to these cards so that I can play them in the order I want to? And I think it's really going to come down to a strategy, the creativeness that we do expect from the players. We do see a lot of calls on what we think is going to win Season 4. We saw the call for Belieber in Season 2 and the call for AoE in Season 3. And for each of those seasons, it was a brand new composition that kind of just showed itself in that round. It was Season 2 was Swirl, and Season 3 was Topaz, both of which were developed then. So we are very excited to see what players do come up with in Season 4. I think there's a lot of opportunity with these different changes, different mechanics, different runes and charms, effects, and all that. So yeah, Jaster, closing message.
One thing like I want to say is just look out for the keep mechanic, man. It's like the amount of skill that it adds to the game. I'm really like excited to watch, especially the players at the top, how they utilize it. Like I only just lay tested it myself a little, but like the possibilities are like so much with this mechanic. Like even this, if you battle 2 teams against each other again and again, you can see like different outcomes now just because of how players choose to utilize their keep. So that's like what I'm most excited to see, how players utilize that.
Yeah. One thing I want to touch on really quickly, I see a lot of questions towards juggling. Unfortunately, this isn't the town hall you're looking for. It'll probably be addressed in a official statement, or if there's anything on that later on. So unfortunately, we don't have the answer with that concern. So yeah, that's it. Meat value in chat asking player 2 draws 1 less card. Is this data driven or has to do with a meat keep mechanic? It's a lot of it has. Again, I'll touch on this like really quickly. It's been that way since Season 0. And a lot of the consideration went towards the whole balance of like whether or not you had like a Nemo and were able to play it. And effectively in round 2, player 1 had like 2 energy and 3 cards, and player 2 had 2 energy and 5. And so it was a lot easier for player 2 to end up having to drop cards or lose cards in this process. And granted, obviously, it is possible to build your deck to avoid this by having more retains or more 0-cost cards. But then that was just like a band-aid over the problem that existed. So we wanted to make it so that players are able to kind of curve out better, or see like a reasonable number of cards to the amount of energy they actually had, rather than being like thrown like all these cards. Because like imagine being player 2, it's turn 2, you keep 1 card, so that card's going to go into your next round, and now you've got 6 cards in your hand and only 2 energy. So like then what? So that's one of the biggest considerations towards that change, just to shed some light on it. But yeah, I think we can wrap it up with that. Again, for any further questions, do feel free to tag us here, Twitter, DMs if you prefer, other servers. We're in a lot of them. So thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate you all spending your time with us here. I hope you're all excited for season 4 as we are. We're looking forward to touch ups on the new game mechanics. We did see all of your reviews on the runes, charms, and cards for all of you content creators out there. Jasser, we almost forgot. Jasser, did you get to share your the infographic, the slides for the mechanics?
Which I can share it with.
Yeah.
Just give me a
Or
second.
or either in the note chat or in a tweet. Maybe in a tweet.
Oh, I'll just
Yeah.
share it currently in view only, or just the
Yeah,
images themselves.
Awesome. All right, yeah, but that's it, guys. Do check out View Only. Jasper's got something good for you guys. It's just an infographic on these game mechanic changes. And again, thank you very much for coming on here. And good evening, good afternoon, good night, or good morning, wherever you are. And that's it. Jasper, take us away.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you on the season 4 battle arena. Bye.
Bye bye.